This is the story of Adolf Eichmann's final day on Earth. A day so chilling, so disturbingly ordinary, that even the guards couldn't look away. But before that final moment, before the rope tightened and history closed a chapter, there was a story of escape, deception, and a trial that shook the world. Let's rewind for a moment, because to truly understand how brutal those last 24 hours were, we need to understand who Eichmann was, and why millions wanted him to face justice. Adolf Eichmann wasn't a general or a battlefield soldier. He was the man behind the paperwork, the one who organized the transport of millions of Jews to concentration camps. He didn't pull the trigger. He built the system, and that, in many ways, made him even more terrifying. You ever meet someone who can sound completely polite while doing something unimaginably evil? That was Eichmann. When the war ended, he vanished. He didn't face a trial in Nuremberg like the others. Instead, he slipped through the cracks. And for years, the world assumed he was dead. But he wasn't. He was hiding. On the other side of the world, it's 1950, Argentina. Eichmann lives quietly under a fake name, Ricardo Clement. He works at a Mercedes-Benz factory, has a wife, kids, a normal life. Can you imagine? The architect of the Holocaust, living like your next-door neighbor. For a decade, he was invisible. But fate, and a bit of arrogance, caught up to him. Mossad, Israel's secret intelligence agency, discovered his location after a German immigrant recognized him. And what came next sounds like a spy movie. But it was very real. Agents tracked his every move for months. They waited for the perfect moment. And one dark night in 1960, as Eichmann walked home from work, a car pulled up behind him. A group of men grabbed him, drugged him, and vanished into the darkness. That moment, quick, silent, and shocking, was the end of Eichmann's freedom. He was secretly flown to Israel, hidden on an El Al airplane. The mission? Operation Finale. Yeah, sounds like a Netflix title, right? It actually became one. The world exploded when Israel announced they had captured Eichmann. For the first time, Holocaust survivors could look into the eyes of the man who planned their families' deaths. The trial was broadcast worldwide. Millions watched. Millions cried. But Eichmann stayed calm. He sat in a glass booth, emotionless, claiming he was just following orders. It was the same excuse used by countless men after the war. But this time, no one was buying it. After months of testimony, witnesses, and shocking confessions, the verdict was announced. Guilty. Guilty on every count. Crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, and then came the sentence, death by hanging. That word, hanging, echoed through the courtroom like a final drumbeat of justice. But here's the twist. Eichmann didn't react. No fear, no tears, no apology. It was as if he had already accepted it. Some said he looked relieved. Others said he looked proud. But whatever it was, he was about to face something he could never organize or control, his own death. The night before his execution, Eichmann sat in a small prison cell in Ramla, Israel. The walls were white, the air was heavy, and the guards were instructed never to leave his side. Can you imagine that silence? The man who had once commanded trains and soldiers now had nowhere to go. At 8 p.m., he was offered his last meal. His choice? A simple meal. Cheese, olives, bread, and a bottle of red wine. He didn't eat much. He just sipped slowly, speaking softly to the guards, as if he was having dinner at home. That's what made it so unsettling. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't begging. He was calm, almost detached. When a priest offered to hear his confession, Eichmann refused. No guilt, no regret. He told the guards, "I have lived my life in obedience to the laws of my country." You can feel the chill, right? Even in his last hours, he saw himself as a loyal officer, not a murderer. As the clock moved past midnight, guards began preparing the execution chamber. The gallows had been built especially for him. The rope was tested twice. Doctors were on standby. Witnesses were waiting. No cameras, no journalists. Just a handful of people about to witness the end of one of history's darkest figures. At 11:55 p.m., the guards entered his cell. Eichmann stood up, straightened his clothes, and said quietly, "I am ready." No hesitation, no tremble. He walked calmly to the chamber, 15 steps down a narrow corridor. His face was pale but composed. The witnesses later said there was something robotic about him, like a man running on discipline, not emotion. When asked for his final words, he lifted his head and said, "Long live Germany. Long live Austria. Long live Argentina. These are the countries I have served and will not forget. I go to my death believing in God. No mention of remorse. No apology for the millions who died because of his actions. Just national pride and denial to the very end. The black hood was placed over his head. The rope adjusted. The lever pulled. And just like that, silence. It was 12:04 a.m., June 1st, 1962. Adolf Eichmann was dead. But even after his death, the story wasn't over. Israel made one final decision that shocked the world. They refused to let Eichmann's body be buried anywhere. Why? To make sure no grave, no stone, no site would ever become a shrine for hate. His body was burned in a secret location. His ashes were scattered over the Mediterranean Sea, outside Israel's territorial waters. No trace left behind. Not a single piece of him would rest on earth. And just like that, Adolf Eichmann, the man who once moved millions across Europe, disappeared forever into the sea. The next morning, newspapers around the globe exploded with headlines. Eichmann executed. Justice served. End of a monster. For Holocaust survivors, it was more than a headline. It was closure. It was proof that justice, though delayed, was real. Yet some psychologists and historians wondered, how could a man so ordinary commit such extraordinary evil? He wasn't insane. He wasn't a wild killer. He was a bureaucrat, someone who treated murder like paperwork. That was perhaps the scariest part, because if ordinary people can do unimaginable things under the excuse of just following orders, what does that say about human nature? Eichmann's final 24 hours weren't filled with screams or chaos. They were filled with silence, the kind of silence that only true guilt can't escape. He went to his death believing he was right, but history had already passed judgment. His death marked the end of an era, and the beginning of a conversation that still continues. How far can obedience go before it becomes evil? And maybe that's the real horror of his last day. Not the hanging, not the ashes in the sea, but the realization that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like ordinary men with ordinary jobs who just stopped asking if what they were doing was right. You know what's wild? Some people spend their final hours writing love letters or calling family. Eichmann spent his last night eating cheese and defending bureaucracy. It's almost darkly comedic if it weren't so horrifying. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the language of rules and routines. And yet, here's the twist. Eichmann's death didn't end the story, because the world didn't stop asking how a system like his ever came to exist, and whether it could happen again. That question, uncomfortable, haunting, and real, still hangs in the air. And maybe that's the true punishment for Eichmann. To be remembered not as a man of power, but as the face of blind obedience. If you found this story haunting, let it remind you of something deeper. Power, whether it's political or personal, compounds with time. Small choices build into massive consequences. So if you want to understand how power, or even money, grows through time, and how the smallest actions can change your entire life, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. The power of compounding. Because history teaches us this. Evil compounds, but so does good, and you get to choose which one grows in your life.